you a woman in medicine feeling overwhelmed and disconnected from the personal fulfillment that you desire? You're in the right place. Join Doctors Joanne and Aaron as they rewrite the rules for women in medicine. Let's begin.
In this episode of Create Meaning in Medicine, I will be interviewing Dr. Joanne Sotelo about the idea of creating intentional pit stops in your workday. And I'm so inspired by this conversation, Joanne. I know you were at a recent training, and I would love to hear more about your thoughts about what exactly do you mean by a pit stop?
Right? Like when I hear that phrase, I'm like, what are they talking about? And I want to refer back to a conference that Erin and I attended many, many years ago, and they were talking about pit stops. And I'll give you a visual. They showed us a video of like race cars, right? How do you call it? Like F1 or something like that. And of course, you have like all these fancy cars, highly efficient. And what do? They stop. They have pit stops. And then they have this crew, this team, and they change the fuel and the tires and all the things. And then they go again. And the message here, it's also you have to have pit stops before you crash, before a tire burns out, before you run out of fuel. But guess what we do? A lot of us are women in medicine. We don't. We're trained, we're programmed to just keep on going. And the intention here is to have a planned pause, something to reset your body, your mind, your spirit. So it's don't wait until you're about to crash. It's the same thing. And then it's not, you might be thinking, I don't have time for that. And the important thing is to remind ourselves, it actually makes us more efficient if we have those planned pauses, planned intentional pit stops where we check in. And it gives us an opportunity to release whatever built up stress we've had, tensions, checking in, and recharge, right? Like it could be just literally a stretch or drinking a little bit of water and reflect on what you've been doing and what's coming next. So it's all those things can take up literally 1 minute. So we shouldn't be saying we don't have time. This is something that's so important. And I can raise my hand of kind of feeling proud that I don't need that, right? Like that's what we learn to reward ourselves with. And it's been definitely a change in my life to really check in throughout the day and have those moments when I'm releasing and recharging.
One of the things I love about our podcast is that we oftentimes share with our listener challenges to their ways of thinking, challenges to what we learned in medicine. And I remember hearing from Brendan Burchard, one of my very first lessons from him was ways to boost your efficiency by 30%. And it was all about taking a break every 50 minutes. He actually recommends taking a 50-minute break, 50-minute break every day during your lunchtime or at some time during your workday. And I realize not everybody in medicine has the ability to do that. And yet, when you can work as many of these things as possible into your workday, you might find you have more energy at the end of the day to see that last patient that, has that hand on the doorknob question that's just going to extend their visit by so much. And when we can keep our energy levels boosted throughout the day, or the whole car, as Joanne talks about the race cars, in tip-top shape, don't you think we need the same as physicians, as women leaders in medicine, as role models about what if you could have your A game, not just at the beginning of your day, but at the end of your day and more efficiently because you do those pit stops intentionally. That's so powerful. And as Joanne said, it doesn't need to take much. You can do it in a minute or less. And if you watch the same video that we watched, it's amazing. They jump in, they do a really powerful planned break, and then they get back into the race as quickly as possible. And I also wonder, we'll talk about this later about what types of breaks can be helpful. But I would wonder, Joanne, how do we even know that we've got a red flag saying, hey, it's time to check in, or that red engine light saying it's time for a pit stop?
Good question, because I often hear oh, I don't need it. If I'm active, I'm in flow. I rather just keep on going, which is true. It makes sense. And it's also the reminder that you can be even better by taking this breaks. But listen, if you've been feeling fatigued, if you haven't been sleeping as well, if you feel like your kind of brain fog is a phrase that I hear a lot, if you feel like you're maybe a little bit more irritable or edgy, right? These are the things that I hear a lot in some of the women physicians that I coach. And then just adding these very intentional breaks can start helping. So think about that. Or are you feeling overwhelmed, but you're disguising it as I'm just busy? It's just my day today. Or you haven't been able to have time for joy and reflection. You feel like things are building up, like you feel stuck or in go mode. Those are just a few of the things that we hear of a lot of the physicians that we coach. And it can be not, we're not minimizing it. These are a lot of the real things that we deal with. And yet just adding these breaks, that it's something that we can control. It's not going to make the problems go away, but it can, again, it can make that foundation, that ground that you're standing in, stronger and more fuel for you to face those other things.
I love that you share a variety of red flags, Joanne. And we've talked before about how using the right term that resonates with our listener. I know for me, overwhelm, exhaustion were common terms for me, not burnout. And so looking at, or even asking who's around you, maybe that's somebody at work, maybe that's your partner, or even your kids, what do they see? The irritable and edgy really resonated with me. And I know those are much less likely to occur for me now because I've made so many intentional pit stops along my day and have raised my awareness. And so I don't have to get there. And my concern is that so many of us wait. I think my analogy is like you're a car, and if you're watching on YouTube, like this car dangling on the on this precipice, getting ready with, if you lean 1 inch in the wrong direction, you're going to go catapulting off of the ledge. And so oftentimes those of us in medicine, we wait until that point before we even recognize, oh, I might need to take a 5-minute break. Oh, I might need to ask for some help. And from my perspective, I want to encourage our listener. I want to encourage my clients that I coach. I want to encourage the culture of medicine. Can we be more proactive and recognize way sooner when you need that break, and not wait until it's precarious, until we're like, one more thing is the straw that broke the camel's back. So thank you, Joanne, for sharing with us some of those red flags to raise our listeners' awareness and see what might be for them. You alluded to this a little bit, Joanne, but what is the cost of skipping these intentional planned pit stops versus investing the time and energy into creating them?
Yes, and you're using the right word of investing, because this is definitely for our overall well-being and our health. And when we think of what's the cost, those are the things that we need to think of. We are all at risk of burnout. We've talked about that plenty, and the numbers are not in our favor. And health issues, a lot of times we ignore it, and we're not resting well. And a lot of physicians have digestive problems, heart problems, and those are things. And the exhaustion might not be the cost, but it'll definitely contribute to it. And it's not just the physical exhaustion, but the emotional exhaustion, and how then that creates a ripple effect of how you feel about yourself and how the people around you perceive you. So of course it'll change your relationships too. You're constantly in output, and then it's a beautiful thing that we're caretakers, that we're serving, that we're constantly giving to others, but we need to make sure that we're refueling ourselves. How many times have we said in this podcast, you cannot give what you don't have, and we cannot, right, like give from an empty cup. So this is a way that we can control to refuel ourselves. And then we can think of the damage outside of us in terms of our decision making, with our patients, with our family, our presence, our energy, and it'll blur the clarity of what's important because we're just in go mode, and then it doesn't give us opportunity to really think outside. There's one phrase that we've heard. I know Oprah talks a lot about this. There's even a book. It's more of like a trauma book, but it's important to think of the body keeps the score, right? So if you're constantly draining yourself, you're going to feel it in you. The funny thing, which is not funny, but is that we are so efficient. We are so resilient. We can stretch ourselves so much that it's not obvious that we're not functioning at our best. But then that's when some of the other problems that we already mentioned can come in. And then what are you role modeling for those around you? And if we're trying to make a difference as leaders and as parents, as in our relationships of loving ourselves, taking care of ourselves so that we can really show up as the best of who we are.
So powerful. And I love that role modeling and leadership, because most of us women in medicine have some role of leadership, whether it's official or unofficial. And when we role model and demonstrate a different way, we actually can change the culture. Might take a while, but if you're role modeling, this is how I refuel, and sharing that with others, then sharing what does that change, then you might change their trajectory as well. So how can we make pit stops a part of our regular routine, Joanne? And what might they look like?
So one of my favorite ones is scheduling them. And I can hear the people around me say, like, I don't have time for that. You were saying that, Erin, too. And it's true. It's not as easy because we're not just behind a computer where it's easy. But figure out what works for you. Right? Again, like Erin was sharing, these are research-based information that if we take small breaks, at least once an hour, our brain works a lot better. So that would be ideal. And if that's not something that you can do, think of what ratio. And it could be just that you're doing morning, noontime, and sometime in the afternoon. And that's a great way to start. And then decide what you're going to do during that time. I love the idea of looking away from the computer and don't grab the phone. A lot of us confuse grabbing our phone as a break, and it could be kind of a break because we're not necessarily taking care of patients or around our family, but it's a lot of stimulation for our brain through our eyes. So I like looking outside the window, closing my eyes, doing some breath work. It doesn't need to be anything fancy, something that just takes a minute or two. Or you can also use cues. For a long time, I would kind of use the opening the door as my cue of I'm just going to take a few deep breaths. But the intention that I was doing something that was meant to be a pit stop for me made it better because, of course, we're breathing all day. But I was like, okay, I'm releasing the energy of this visit while I walk to get my other patient. So figure out what works for you and try different things. The other thing that I sometimes do, and I recommend a lot of people, is because we start with good intention of scheduling and then life happens. So the other way to do it is use your own triggers. Use those things, how it shows up. If it shows up with a headache, you get snappy, you can't focus, just assume that you need a break. Don't question it. Just say, what do I really need right now? Maybe it's a break. Maybe I need to go for a walk towards the farthest away bathroom. You don't even have to go outside. And then really ask yourself, what do I need to release? Another one is, which I love as a psychiatrist, is check in emotionally. How are you feeling? It might be that you're physically tired. It might be that you're worried. And it might be that you're not having a great day. And that's could be part of why you're not feeling great. And use that also as a cue to then do a lot of self-care, which is another, right? Like a pit stop. It's one of the easiest ways to really do that self-care that we talk about. And create your own kind of pit stop toolkit, right? Like we can give you all our ideas, the things that we recommend, the things that work for us, but try them on and see what works for you. I've shared that I have one of my clients is a surgeon, and she would do surgeries that would take hours. So she cannot be like, I am going to take a minute now to do a pit stop. But she had a few cues inside the OR that she would look at and just take a deep breath. And it's not a very long pit stop, but for her it was very important. And when she started feeling frustrated, she knew, okay, let me look at this picture of something that she really liked in her OR. She would take a deep breath and then reset. So think of what would be that neat tool, kind of the pit stop toolkit for yourself.
And to build on that, Joanne, what I've found is that when we, in the beginning, it takes more intention and energy. We have to think about, okay, I had this cue and now I need to do this thing. And yet with practice, you can learn to have that be your go-to thing. For me, I've spent a lot of time practicing belly breathing because the belly breathing, deep belly breaths it's your body telling your brain everything's okay, because we don't do deep belly breaths when we're under attack or we're supposed to be stressed or anxious about things. So it's a tool I've learned. I take my breath everywhere, and I've used it so often. I remember one time driving and it started snowing really hard, and I realized I checked in with my body and I was like, oh, I'm already belly breathing. My body already knew what to do because it was my go-to tool. But that was after practicing that. And so when you learn to put this into place and you find one that works for your unique circumstances, it can sometimes just kick in and you don't even need to think about it, which I love, because then those tools are readily available and at our fingertips. Joanne, I'm going to summarize some of the things you shared. I took so many notes. You shared this idea of intentional pit stops, and that means you are taking a planned break in order to get your best outcomes, to bring your A game, to have the most functioning Formula One race car where you are not waiting until the wheels are falling off. There's no more rubber on the tires before checking in. You're actually doing it intentionally before things start falling apart. You shared with us, how can we be aware and what are our red flags that we can become aware of? Things like fatigue, irritability, edgy, and can we learn to pay attention to those as our cues? And you shared with us the cost. What happens when we don't take those intentional breaks? There can be what I always call collateral damage, where it might be negatively affecting your relationships, your quality of work, your energy levels. And you talked about when you can invest in those little breaks, that you can get more benefit than the cost of doing that. And then you talked about ways that we can schedule those breaks in a manner that works for us uniquely, which for physicians, so oftentimes it's like, well, that won't work. I'm a hospitalist. That won't work. I work in the ER. That won't work. I'm a surgeon. And yet you shared everyone has the capacity to find some way, some cue, something that you can bring with you in order to have those pit stops that work for you and your unique circumstances. And Joanne, I'm sure you have another piece of wisdom to share with our listener. What else would you tell them about these intentional pit stops?
I have two things. Something that came up while I was listening, reflect on what I was saying. Sometimes we need to give permission to the people around us to let us know there's something going on. And because of the analogy of the cars, because I'm don't know much about cars, and sometimes I need to let someone else drive my car for a little bit. That analogy is funny because, anyways, I'm not gonna go there. But the other day, my oldest was visiting, and they went on. They used my car, and then they came back like, "Mommy, I think that your tires need changing, and there's a funny noise that your car's making." And I did not notice it. And then I took the car in, and yes, they needed some realignment, something easy. But have I not listened to them to something that I wasn't even noticing because I drive that car all the time. So those little things, they just become normal. So because we live our lives every day, we don't always know. And sometimes I always say the people around us can see things that are about ourselves that we can't always see. So let's have a few people that we trust reflect on those things and be open to that. And you can reflect for someone else as well. So that kind of a side note that just came to mind. And then the one thing I do want to leave our audience with is, even though we're so good, we're so efficient, we're so resilient, we're really not meant to be running on empty. And that's really not fair to us. And we need to think of these pit stops as moments of self-leadership. I love that reflection, self-leadership, in a way that it'll help us release, realign, and rise stronger.
I love that, Joanne. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom about intentional pit stops. And just in case our listener hasn't yet left us a rating or review, we would love for you to do that, because that will help us get in front of more listeners and grow our audience so we can share these messages with them as well. And also, then your input can help us learn how we can serve you better. And then also, we would love for you to stay tuned, because our next episode is coming right up.
Do you want exclusive resources and the opportunity to connect with us? Then visit createmeaninginmedicine.com now, where you'll dive deeper into how you can create meaning in medicine. And if you're serious about optimizing your results, take 2 quick steps now. Connect with us on the website and tune in to the next episode.